The wagon train had left her behind 3 days ago. Sarah Mitchell watched the dust settle on the horizon, her chest tight with the kind of fear that makes your bones ache. They had given her one blanket, a half-empty canteen, and their best wishes before rolling away across the endless prairie. Her cough had grown too loud, too persistent. The others feared consumption, and fear makes people cruel. She was 19 years old and completely alone. The first night, she heard wolves. The second night, she heard nothing, which somehow felt worse. By the third morning, her water was gone, and the sun beat down like a hammer against an anvil. Sarah stumbled through the tall grass, her dress torn and filthy, her dark hair falling loose from its braid. She had stopped crying. Tears were a luxury she could not afford. When she finally collapsed, the earth felt almost welcoming. She pressed her cheek against the warm soil and closed her eyes, accepting what seemed inevitable. Death would find her here, unmarked and unmissed. The orphan girl from Boston who had traveled west seeking a new life would become just another pile of bones on the prairie. But death did not come. Instead, she heard hoofbeats. Her eyes fluttered open to see a shadow falling across her face, blocking out the merciless sun. She looked up slowly, squinting against the light. A man sat astride a painted horse, looking down at her with eyes as dark and fathomless as a midnight sky. His chest was bare, his skin bronzed by countless summers. Black hair fell past his shoulders, adorned with feathers and beads that caught the sunlight. He was Lakota, she realized with a strange, detached clarity. She had seen his people from a distance during the journey west. He should have terrified her. Instead, she felt only relief that someone, anyone, had found her before the end. Chief Lakota had been hunting alone when he spotted the woman lying in the grass like a fallen bird. At first, he thought her dead, but then he saw the slight rise and fall of her chest. He dismounted in one fluid motion, approaching her with the caution reserved for wounded creatures. White settlers had brought nothing but trouble to his people, yet something about this woman stirred unexpected compassion in his heart. Her lips were cracked and bleeding. Her skin, normally pale, had burned angry red under the unforgiving sun. But her eyes, when they met his, held no hatred or fear. Only exhaustion and a quiet acceptance of fate. He knelt beside her, unstopping his water pouch and lifting her head gently. She drank greedily, water spilling down her chin, and he had to pull the pouch away before she made herself sick. She tried to speak, but he shook his head. Words could come later, if she survived. He lifted her easily, surprised by how little she weighed, and placed her across his horse. She did not fight or protest, which told him how close to death she truly was. As they rode toward his village, he wondered what had brought her to this desolate place, abandoned and alone. His people would question his decision. The white settlers were not friends to the Lakota. They had broken treaties, pushed his people from sacred lands, and brought disease and death in their wake. Yet Lakota had not become chief by following fear. He led with wisdom and the guidance of his visions. And something in those brief moments beside the dying woman had felt significant, though he could not yet name why. The village appeared in the distance, a collection of teepees arranged in a great circle. His people emerged as he approached, their faces registering shock at the sight of the white woman draped across his horse. He ignored their whispers and carried her directly to his own teepee, laying her on soft buffalo robes while his sister rushed to fetch water and herbs. Sarah woke to unfamiliar sounds and smells. Smoke, sage, something earthy and medicinal. Her body ached everywhere, but the desperate thirst had eased. She opened her eyes slowly, her vision adjusting to the dim interior of the teepee. A woman sat nearby, grinding something in a wooden bowl. When she noticed Sarah watching, she smiled gently and brought a cup to her lips. The liquid tasted bitter but soothing. Days blurred together. Sometimes the woman tended her, sometimes others came, speaking in a language Sarah did not understand. But always, morning and evening, the chief came. She learned his name through repeated listening, Lakota. He would sit beside her, checking her fever with the back of his hand, ensuring she drank the healing teas. His presence was quiet but commanding, and Sarah found herself watching for his visits, her heart beating faster when he entered. She should have been terrified. She had heard stories about savage Indians, tales meant to frighten children and justify violence. But nothing she had experienced matched those stories. The Lakota had shown her more kindness in her illness than her own people had shown in health. They fed her, healed her, asked for nothing in return. As her strength returned, Sarah began to help around the teepee. She learned to prepare food in their way, to tan hides, to recognize useful plants. The chief's sister, Winona, became her teacher and friend, using gestures and simple words to bridge the language gap. Sarah absorbed everything hungrily, grateful for purpose after weeks of being unwanted and useless. But it was Dakota who occupied her thoughts most often. She watched him lead his people with quiet authority, settling disputes, planning hunts, sitting in council with the elders. He never raised his voice, yet everyone listened. And sometimes, she caught him watching her too, his expression unreadable but intense. Those moments made her skin warm and her breath catch. She knew she was a complication for him, a white woman among his people when tensions ran high. The council meeting lasted deep into the night. Dakota sat with the elders, smoke from the sacred pipe curling between them. The debate had been fierce. Some argued the white woman should be sent away, that her presence endangered the tribe. Others suggested using her as a bargaining piece with the soldiers who occasionally patrolled the territory. But Dakota had made his decision, and now he spoke it aloud. He would take her as his wife. The silence that followed was deafening. His closest friend, Chaitin, shook his head in disbelief. The elders exchanged worried glances. Only his grandfather, ancient and wise, nodded slowly as if he had seen this coming in the smoke and stars. Taking a white wife was unprecedented, potentially dangerous. Yet Dakota had never been one to bow to fear or convention. He had seen something in Sarah during her recovery, a strength hidden beneath her frail appearance. She had adapted, learned, worked alongside his people without complaint or arrogance. She belonged nowhere, which meant she could belong here. When he told Sarah the next morning, she stared at him with wide eyes, struggling to understand. Winona helped translate, and Sarah's face cycled through shock, confusion, and something that might have been hope. She asked why. Dakota struggled to find words in her language, settling finally on the simplest truth, because he chose her, and she needed choosing. The ceremony was small, performed under a full moon with Winona and the elders as witnesses. Sarah wore a dress of soft deerskin adorned with beadwork that Winona had helped her make. Dakota wore his finest ceremonial clothing, his hair decorated with eagle feathers earned through acts of courage and leadership. When they joined hands, Sarah felt the enormity of the moment settle over her like a blanket. She was no longer alone, no longer unwanted. That night, in their teepee, Dakota spoke to her in halting English he had learned from traders. He told her she was free to leave if she wished. Sarah looked at the man who had become her husband, this proud chief who had given her life when death seemed certain. She thought of the wagon train that had abandoned her, the orphanage in Boston where she had been just another mouth to feed, the endless years of being invisible and insignificant. Then she thought of Winona's friendship, the respectful nods from the village women, the purpose she had found in daily tasks. And she thought of Dakota, whose quiet strength made her feel safe for the first time in her life. She took his hand and spoke words she had practiced with Winona. In Lakota, she told him she wished to stay. His face, usually so controlled, broke into a smile that transformed him. He pulled her close, and she melted into his warmth, feeling truly chosen, truly wanted for the first time in her entire existence. The months that followed were not easy. Some in the village remained suspicious of her, and Sarah knew the world beyond their circle was hostile to such unions. Soldiers and settlers would see her as a traitor. The Lakota had every reason to doubt her loyalty. But Dakota never wavered in his support, and gradually, she proved herself worthy of the choice he had made. She learned the language, the customs, the stories passed down through generations. She worked hard, laughed with the children, and sat beside her husband in council when he requested her perspective. She became not just Dakota's wife, but a member of the tribe, respected for her skills and dedication. When threats came from the outside world, as they inevitably did, she stood with her people, no longer the abandoned white woman but a Lakota by choice and love. Sarah had belonged to no one, claimed by no one, until a chief looked past fear and convention and chose her. In doing so, he had given her more than survival. He had given her a home, a people, and a love that defied the boundaries others tried to build between them. Claude is AI and can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.